The default is going to be you're going to be obese, you're probably going to develop diabetes, and you're not going to feel very good. And that's just the way it is, and you have to step outside of that in order to change things. Muscle is so protective, in fact, that is strongly correlated to anti-cancer effects. So here's your 4 steps that will result in consistent, progressive, sustainable fat loss.
Sal, there's no denying right now we're in the middle of a health crisis when it comes to chronic disease, the amount of people that are overweight and obese. And to me, there's 2 different ways of looking at this. Are people getting the right information to apply? And then secondarily, or not even secondarily, the other arm of it is, do they have the discipline to apply it? So how do you feel about that and the root of what we're going through right now?
Well, we've been on this path now for a few decades. One of the reasons why I think it's so challenging is modern life is really geared and designed in a way to where the default is poor health. So we've made things easier in terms of physical activity, or the sense that we don't have to move as much. Our markets have given us what we want when it comes to food. So food is hyper palatable, very convenient. And you combine those 2 things and you have poor health. And then you add into that a medical system that doesn't do a good job of helping people deal with chronic issues, but rather comes up with Band-Aid type solutions. And there's a lot of potential reasons as to why, one of which being it's hard to get people to make changes to their life. It's easy to give people a pill and have them to take it, especially if it gives them some initial kind of relief. So when you combine all those things, there's really no question as to why we would end up here or how we're here. Now, you mentioned discipline, and I like using that word, but a lot of people think that the opposite of that means that they're lazy. That's not really the case. Discipline, there's lots and lots and lots of people who maybe suffer from chronic health issues or even just obesity, who are also extremely disciplined in other parts of their lives. Really, it's just a skill that a lot of us haven't practiced or developed around a lifestyle that promotes good health. And part of that reason is because you have to step outside of what's normal. It's not normal to, or should I say average, to structure activity into your day. You have to literally plan it, right? It's not common to eat only, let's say, whole natural foods, or to avoid hyperpalatable processed foods that tend to promote overeating. So the path towards discipline, which leads to the better health, is really identifying those things and then starting to implement some of those practices slowly over time so that you then have the discipline around those types of things. But it's challenging. It really is challenging, because if you just go about your life the way you're supposed to, the default is going to be you're going to be obese, you're probably going to develop diabetes, and you're not going to feel very good. And that's just the way it is, and you have to step outside of that in order to change things. So it's definitely an uphill battle. You mentioned information. There's a lot of really good information that's out there. There's also a lot of bad information. I like to when we talk about information, I like to blame the space that I work in, the health and fitness space, for some of the problems, because we tend to put out a lot of information that counters previous information or counters each other. And we get into these kind of battles over who is more right. This guy over here says paleo is the best diet, and then you got somebody else that says, no, plant-based is the way you're supposed to eat. And then this person over here says, count your calories. This person over here says calories don't matter. So people get confused. So what I try to do a lot is talk to people in my space, trying to convince them to really, hone in the message, focus on the big rocks, not confuse people. Because if we don't tackle this properly and effectively, this problem really threatens to bankrupt society as we know it. So it's the biggest problem. That, by the way, chronic health issues also encompass the mental health issues that we're also suffering from. Anxiety and depression are closely connected to poor physical health. It's all connected. So this is a big problem for sure.
Well, we can look at this from another angle too, because you're in a unique position as somebody who's been in this world for, I think it's 2.5 decades, and you've worked with people and you've seen people that are successful, people that aren't. When it comes to the people that have made this work and stuck with it for a long period of time, What do you feel the key difference is there?
Well, people who do it the right way, okay, because you can find somebody that's super consistent with diet and exercise, but they've also developed a poor relationship with those things, and it becomes more body obsession. And you're just, what's the term? Robbing Peter to pay Paul type of deal. So they'll eschew good relationships with people, and it becomes a kind of a, like I said, an abuse relationship, in which case they may have better health in some ways, but poor health in other ways. So taking those people aside, and the reason why I said that, by the way, is a lot of people in my space who display these amazing physiques that aren't necessarily healthy, that we think are healthy. But if you do it the right way, right, you have this really balanced, healthy relationship with exercise and nutrition. It's something you do on a consistent basis. The root of that is really caring for yourself in the truest sense. So that's where it starts. It starts from this standpoint of like, I want to care for myself. In the truth, I want to be healthy. I want to care for myself. And the side effects being, I look good and all that other stuff. But really the main thing is I just want to feel good and be healthy in the truest sense. And then it's going to be a slow step-by-step approach. And if you do it that way, then you develop a relationship with exercise and diet where you enjoy it. And that's really how you can become consistent forever, where it's something that you value to the point where there's an enjoyment. Now, I don't mean necessarily pleasure, although, good relationship with exercise and diet does have lots of moments of, where it feels good from a pleasurable standpoint. I mean enjoying it the same way you may enjoy struggling and other things that you find lots of value in, right? So like I have children. Anybody who has kids knows it's not always, fun and pleasure. It's oftentimes very challenging, but I enjoy it because of the value that it brings me. So, without getting too specific, I guess, I would say that's kind of the main theme that underlines, the consistency that some people will have when they've developed that relationship with those things.
And for somebody who's been trying to tackle this for a number of years and maybe has some success and then bounces back and loses their momentum when it comes to fitness and diet, and they want to do that deeper work and get to the source of really caring for themselves and doing this from the right place, if they don't have that self-love and that wanting to take care of themselves in the truest sense, how do they begin to form that?
Yeah. So when you say self-love, that is exactly what it is. A lot of people picture the warm, fuzzy feeling that you get. My friend Arthur Brooks says that the warm, fuzzy feeling is not love. That's evidence that love may be there. It's like smelling Thanksgiving dinner, but it's not the Thanksgiving dinner, right? So when I'm talking about self-care or love, I mean the action of it. Because you're not always going to have warm, fuzzy feelings towards yourself. It just doesn't work that way. So, and I want to say that because someone listening might be like, what are you talking about? Like sometimes I'm disappointed in myself, or I don't feel like I want to hug myself. Like it's a strange thing, that sounds way too out there. It doesn't make any sense. No, that's just the action. So you can say to yourself, what would be steps I could take to care for myself in the truest sense? If you start there, then the steps tend to be more appropriate. So if you are not exercising now and you say, I need to care for myself, then you know that the answer to that is not to go from 0 days a week to 6 days a week in the gym. You're going to go and you're going to slowly do it, and you're going to get your body to get used to the exercise. You're going to train with an appropriate level of intensity, not to the point where you can't move anymore. You're going to feel like you're throwing up. That's not how you care for someone. And if you do it that way, you'll take the necessary small steps, and you're not going to have this like horrible experience where a lot of people, they'll start off and they're not coming from really a self-care standpoint. It's more of a, like, I hate myself, or I'm inadequate, or, I'm not sexy, or I'm gross, or whatever. And then they overdo it, and they go to the gym and they beat the crap out of themselves, or they take too many steps in a, whatever direction, and it just becomes unsustainable. So it's got to be a slow process, and it's got to be from a real self-care standpoint. And then balance is baked into that, because there are going to be times when caring for yourself means you're working out. And there's going to be lots of times, or other times, when caring for yourself means you're not going to the gym today because maybe you didn't sleep well, or you're not feeling so well, or, your stress levels are too high, and intense exercise might not be good for you.
For somebody that wants to dive into this, and right now we'll use fitness as the example, they want to start slow and get that right stimulus. How do they begin to figure that out? Because the natural inclination for somebody that isn't doing anything at this point and wants to get started and make big changes is going to be to push it to the point of hurting themselves, or to the point where they're actually hating the actual routine that they're going through.
Yeah.
So, how do they find that sweet spot when it comes to stimulus?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I'll use another analogy. Remember, the body changes from exercise, right? So the goal here is, let's say, become more fit, or improve my strength or my stamina, or let's say get leaner, build muscle, right? So that's kind of the aim, is to get those types of results. Well, exercise doesn't do that. Exercise causes that. What I mean by that is exercise is a stress on the body, and then the body adapts to that stress so that that stress no longer becomes a stress. Now, this is why you end up adding weight to the bar or going a little harder, because then you have to kind of add a little more stress to get the body to change again. But it is a stress. Your body adapts from the stress. If the stress is too high, you will overcome your body's ability to adapt, and then your body's just focused on healing. So here's the analogy I like to use with another system of adaptation of the body, which is your skin's ability to tan when exposed to the sun. So when you go out into the sun, the UV rays from the sun are a stress on the skin. Then your body, it uses things like melanin to darken the skin to adapt to that stress, so that that stress no longer stresses you. And then if you want to get any darker, you have to stay on the sun a little bit longer, or with a little bit more intensity to continue to let's say further the tan along. Well, imagine if you haven't been out in the sun for a while and you went outside and you spend too long in the sun. Are you going to get a tan? No, you're going to get sunburn. You're going to get sunburn. You're not going to get a tan. Your body's only going to want to heal from that sunburn, and you haven't accomplished anything really. And if anything, you've reduced your ability to get further sun exposure. There's a lot of danger, of course, associated with that. So what would be the best way to get a tan if you haven't been out in the sun very much? You go out and get a little bit of exposure, just a little more than you're used to. So anything more than you're used to now will get your body to adapt. That's all. So if you do nothing, literally 5 squats is going to be more than you're doing now, or a 10-minute walk is more than you're doing now. There's a couple other things you want to look at, right? Muscle soreness is a good indicator that you might have done too much. You either shouldn't feel sore or feel a little bit of soreness after a workout, like the kind of soreness you have to search for. So you kind of stretch and move and go, oh, I think I worked out. Like, that's okay. That's good. You don't want the kind of soreness where you're moving funny, or you just touch it and the muscle is hurting. You went way too hard. You've gone beyond what's necessary for the adaptation to occur, which means you've also now compromised your body's ability to adapt. Now your body's mainly just focusing on healing. So those are kind of some things that I would pay attention to in terms of what's the right intensity. And I do want to be very clear, when you're looking at the stimulus that exercise provides that causes the adaptation, there's a perfect dose, and that perfect dose will get you the fastest results, okay? More than that will get you results slower. Less than that, of course, gets you results slower as well. So it's the perfect dose. So it's like this bell curve. So when you hit that perfect amount, you feel energized after, so you feel good. You feel good throughout the day. The next day, you're not really sore, or maybe a tiny bit sore, and you just kind of feel like, wow, that was not bad. That's the right dose. More than that is going to get you there slower. And I have to say that because I need to sell the idea, because people tend to think, well, if I do a little more than what he said, then I'll get there faster. You won't. You'll actually get there slower. So it's the right dose. You should feel good, and it should feel like a smooth process. Now, someone may be confused right now because they go on social media and they see people having these really fit people just beating the crap out of themselves, having these crazy workouts. Well, consider their fitness level, their level of experience, and how long they've been working out in order to get their bodies to further adapt or to accomplish any more performance gains or strength gains. They do need to train at a very high intensity, because they've already been training for so long. To get any further, it's going to be really hard. taking a couch potato to taking someone who doesn't run at all and getting them to run a mile without stopping, okay, is easier than taking an Olympic gold medalist and having them shave off 0.2 seconds off of their mile time. I mean, that sounds like nothing, but when you're talking about super high performance, squeezing out anything else is like you are moving the smallest pieces to make that happen. So don't look at these hyper fit, super consistent athletes and, models or whatever on social media and say, oh, I need to work out like that. That's not what you need to do. For your body, the right dose looks a lot different.
And for the person who tuning in right now is looking to incorporate resistance training to the point of getting the health benefits, and they have a busy life, this is just going to be one piece of their health and wellness foundation. How do they know what that goal is they're trying to get to? Obviously, they're going to want to ramp up if this is new to them and take their time getting into it. But once they're in a cadence and this is part of their routine, how much do we need to do to get, say, 80% of the benefits when it comes to health and wellness?
Most people could get probably all the results that they want with about 2 days a week of strength training. More advanced, you're looking at 3, maybe 4, and that's it. So I trained people for years, and the average person, is not trying to look like a bodybuilder or walk on stage and, have veins in their shoulders. The average person wants to look good and feel good. They want to have an improvement in the quality of your life. You could go really far with a well-structured 2-day-a-week strength training routine. For somebody who's not exercising right now at all or doing any strength training at all, they'll get phenomenal results probably for a good 6-month period with just 1 day a week. So it doesn't require a lot. Strength training sends the signal. The rest of the week is what that's where the adaptation is happening. Now, the workout within that time frame changes. So a 2-day-a-week routine for a beginner looks very different than when they become, more advanced. They've been training for a year or two consistently. But there's so much you could do with just that most people don't need more than that. Now, people are probably wondering, well, so I'm only going to be active 1 or 2 days a week? No. We're talking about strength training. In terms of activity, it's a good idea to be active every day. Now, what does that look like? For most people, walking. For most people, if you were to take 2 to 3, 10 to 15-minute walks a day for the rest of your life, you're going to get, 85% of the benefits that activity will provide you in terms of health and longevity. Now, you're not going to have super stamina and endurance, but in terms of the health benefits, tremendous just from doing that. And I like to structure those post-meal. So it's like breakfast, 10-minute walk, lunch, 10-minute walk, dinner, 10-minute walk, 30-minute walk every single day. Or if you go 15, turns into 45 minutes. And you're doing phenomenal. And I'm talking about the average person. Again, this is a person with a family, a job. They're not trying to make their life revolve around fitness. They just want to have great longevity, health, mobility, energy benefits from it. That's it. You don't need to do a whole lot. It's got to be done right.
So for somebody who's tuned into this point and their ears are perked and they're thinking about starting some resistance training, maybe at this point they're doing none or very little. Let's talk about some of the benefits people get when they start to do that on a regular basis and put muscle on their frame.
Yeah.
What advantages are they going to get?
Oh man, muscle is probably, I would say, the most protective when you look at the context of the health issues or chronic health ills that we suffer from in modern societies. Muscle is the most protective tissue that we have for a few reasons. One of the biggest health issues that we deal with from a longevity standpoint, from everything to heart disease to cancer and mental issues, including brain degeneration type issues, our ability to have really, really good, or should I say, to remain sensitive to our insulin levels, to be able to utilize glucose well is paramount. It's paramount, right? Developing insulin insensitivity or insulin resistance before you can even tell on a test where the doctor says, you're pre-diabetic. I mean, it happens a good 5 to 10 years before that. You start to see signs if you're really close enough. That right there is tied to so many chronic health issues. One of the best things you could do to offset that or buffer yourself against that is to build muscle. Muscle is extremely insulin sensitive, very, very insulin sensitive, to the point where there's studies on the severely obese where they don't even have them lose any weight. I'm talking about people who are like 60, 70 pounds overweight or more. They just have them build a little bit of muscle, and you see significant improvements in insulin resistance. Muscle is insulin sensitive, and muscle serves as a storage vessel for glycogen. Glycogen is what your body makes from sugar or glucose or carbohydrates, okay? So when you eat something with sugar or glucose, and you've got that, or carbohydrates, and you've got that glucose circulating in your blood, insulin goes up, and then it shuttles glucose into storage vessels, the liver being the main one, and then the rest is muscle. Big muscles, or bigger muscles, I should say, have more of a capacity. So it just sucks up that glucose. So you get incredible insulin sensitivity effects from that. You also get a metabolic boost from building muscle. Muscle is calorie expensive. It costs a lot of calories for your body to maintain muscle. Building a little bit of muscle will speed up your metabolism. Now, why is that important? Well, if you have a faster metabolism today, you are far less likely to be obese and far less likely to suffer the health consequences of obesity. Like if I could snap my fingers and speed up everybody's metabolism by 10 to 15%, we would probably solve, in a large effect, the obesity epidemic, because you're just burning more calories sitting there, right? Versus having to move more to burn those calories, which is a very ineffective approach. You're burning more calories just sitting there. So you have a faster metabolism. The other benefit is the hormonal effects that the muscle building process encourages. Just to build muscle, just trying to build muscle, your body has to organize its hormones in a way to do so. In other words, the part of the muscle building process is your body taking its hormones and moving them and shifting them so that they can fuel or drive this muscle building process. Well, what does that look like? You're more sensitive to insulin. I said that earlier. You're more sensitive to testosterone. You actually upregulate what are called androgen receptors. So the receptors that testosterone attaches to, well, you get more of them. So now your normal testosterone becomes super testosterone. Your testosterone also raises. This is both in men and women. By the way, women listening right now, testosterone is just as important for them as it is for men. They just have lower amounts. Low testosterone in women produces the same negative effects in women that it does in men. Low libido, low energy, low drive, low motivation, brain fog, that kind of stuff. So you just get better testosterone response and levels. You get a balancing of estrogen and progesterone in both men and women. But for women, this is extremely important. You get healthier growth hormone levels. This is the youth hormone, and the receptors that growth hormone attaches to also upregulate, meaning you have more of these receptors. Cortisol becomes more appropriate. So you're supposed to have cortisol that comes up in the morning, comes down at night. More muscle promotes that. So you don't have the kind of inverse, which a lot of people have. Low cortisol in the morning, they got to take a bunch of caffeine to wake up. And then at night, cortisol spikes because of stress or whatever, dysfunction, then they can't sleep. So it kind of reverses that. So your energy throughout the day, you get tired at night. When the cortisol goes down, you become healthier. Muscle is so protective, in fact, that is strongly correlated to anti-cancer effects. Okay, I'll share a study with you that's quite remarkable. So I'm going to use a very unhealthy population just to prove a point. When you look at athletes, high-level athletes in all sports are not the epitome of health. Okay, contrary to popular belief, a pro football player, basketball player, pro bodybuilder, these are not the healthiest people in the world. Their job, their goal is to just perform at the highest level, and they compromise and sacrifice their health in order to do so. In fact, pro football players have a lower life expectancy than the average American because of the damage that they incur playing their sport and to the extremes that they push the body. Well, pro bodybuilders, another great example, they're not healthy. These people push their bodies to the limit with their training, diet, lifestyle, plus they add a bunch of drugs to the regimen to try to just build these insanely grotesque bodies with crazy amounts of muscle, and they're not healthy for all intents. Anybody who knows the sport knows how unhealthy they are. Now, here's what's weird: they suffer from cancer rates that are lower, significantly lower than the average American. How's that possible? I mean, they're really beating their bodies up and they're doing all kinds of crazy stuff when it comes to performance-enhancing drugs. Yet their cancer rates are significantly lower. That's because muscle is so anti-cancer that it actually not only does it negate the poor health choices that they make, they actually have an anti-cancer effect. Muscle is so anti-cancer, it's remarkable. It's actually you can lower your all across the board cancer risk by 20 to 25 to 50% just by having a more muscular physique. And that means you could do anything else. You don't have to change anything else. You just have more muscle on your body. So it's pretty remarkable. Strength is one of the best predictors of all-cause mortality. So they've done studies. Well, they do a strength test, a grip test. So there's nothing, by the way, special about grip strength other than it's a proxy for overall body strength. So if I have strong grip, probably means I have a strong body. I have a good amount of muscle on my body. A grip strength test is a better predictor of all-cause mortality than BMI. It's a better predictor of all-cause mortality than almost any other single metric. So you want muscle on your body. You want to try to build that muscle. It just makes being lean a lot easier because of the faster metabolism. So this is what most people need to aim for. They should train in a way to build muscle, feed their bodies in order to do so, and that'll help them be leaner, stay leaner, and improve their longevity. And it doesn't require as much time in the gym as, let's say, training for stamina and endurance.
All right, a lot to get into there. That was powerful. I want to start with the cancer piece. So you mentioned the fact that these bodybuilders, even though they're doing all sorts of things that are unhealthy to their body, oftentimes have a less rate of cancer because of the muscle. Talk about the physiology there. What's happening?
That's a very interesting question. So as far as I know, and as deep as I've gone into it, because this is something that we're still learning from, there are anti-cancer compounds that are released and produced by muscle. So muscle is kind of like this counter to the proliferative effects of cancer cells. It's like a check and balance. It may also have to do with the mitochondrial health that building muscle promotes. So mitochondria, obviously, the common saying is it's the engine of the cell. Mitochondrial dysfunction seems to play a very significant role in both cancer cell formation and proliferation. Building muscle is a phenomenal way to maintain mitochondrial health. So it may also have to do with that. And then I mentioned the insulin sensitizing effects. Having insulin resistance is closely connected to many different types of cancers. This is why obesity is a cancer risk, probably one of the reasons why. So it could be all three of those things, but we do know that muscle is incredibly anti-cancer. That's as far as we know now. But I do find it interesting, right, that I didn't expect to find that with bodybuilders. Bodybuilders are pushing hormones into their body at such crazy rates. You would think they would have higher cancer rates because certain hormones, especially if cancer is present, can drive cancer. And yet here they are sitting with significantly lower cancer rates. They also, building muscle also amplifies mTOR, mammalian target rapamycin. This is a signaler of muscle growth. Well, if you expose cancer cells to mTOR, they grow. So you would think that building muscle, is sending all these like growth factors that would cause cancer cells to proliferate, but the opposite is true. So it's pretty interesting. It's very interesting, in fact. But yeah, the data is pretty clear on this.
No science behind this, but what pops into my head too is the fact that because you have muscle and that's regulating blood glucose and bringing insulin down, insulin is a growth hormone, so you're going to naturally have that lowered by having more muscle, which cancer is growth out of control. So maybe there's some connection there.
Could be because insulin itself, I'm always careful with, what's interesting with cancer is that things that would be okay in a healthy context could also drive cancer in an unhealthy context. So protein, right? High protein diet, very healthy. If you have a tumor, eating a lot of protein may actually drive or fuel the growth of the tumor cells. Same thing with carbohydrates and even fats. Even fats, although ketogenic diets seem to be anti-cancer, there are certain cancers that thrive in a ketogenic environment. Testosterone, right? Having good, healthy, high testosterone levels, very good for men in particular. Like it's anti-cancer, it's anti-heart disease, it's anti-Alzheimer's and dementia. But let's say you have a testosterone-sensitive cancer like prostate cancer. Well, if you have high testosterone, it could fuel that, now developing cancer. So it's interesting. I think you're going somewhere, though, because I don't know if insulin itself is pro-cancer, but if your insulin levels are so high because your body's so desensitized, there may be a point where too much insulin then spills over and starts to drive strange behaviors in the body, right? So there may be something there.
My other point of curiosity, as you explain all that too with the bodybuilders and cancer, is you wonder how much longevity those people have in general. How long are they living?
Not great.
To get cancer.
Oh, right.
Because of how much muscle mass they have on and how unnatural that is. And again, some of the things that they're likely taking to get to that point and maintaining it, if they're not living as long as the rest of us, maybe they're getting less cancer as well.
Great question, but their life expectancy is the same as the average person's.
Okay. Just a
yeah,
thought.
I thought the same thing, but the life expectancy of bodybuilders, competitive bodybuilders, is right in line, which isn't great, by the way. It's right in line with the average American. Now, so you say, well, they have lower cancer risk. Why are they living as long as the average person? They have much higher rates of heart disease and kidney and liver issues, probably due to the drugs that they use. So again, they're not a healthy population. I just found it fascinating that they had such low cancer rates in comparison, and it's the muscle.
Well, while we're on the longevity piece, let's talk about muscle and longevity as a whole. So for somebody that is one of their goals, they want to live a long life and prolong that, why do they want to make sure they're putting on muscle as a piece of that?
Well, besides all the reasons that I said earlier, which are all very important, the other reason is, one of the top causes of mortality as we get older is loss of function and mobility. It's not talked about enough, right? We know cancer, we know heart disease, but in the top 5 is bone loss, sarcopenia, and I can't move, and I fall, and I hurt myself, and then my health really takes a dive. Anybody who's ever worked with the elderly population, when I used to train people towards the end of my career, this became kind of a niche market that I started really training a lot of, right? So at one point I trained a lot of doctors, then they started sending me their patients. And many of these patients were 65 and older. A significant portion, at least a quarter of them, were 70 and older. And as I'm training them and training the doctors, learning about this, what's considered special population. And there was a saying that I heard the surgeons say that I thought was crazy, but it's true. They said, in that population, there's a saying that we have in the hospital, which is, grandma broke her hip and then died of pneumonia, right? So it's like when you're in your 70s and you're not very strong because you've lost lots of mobility, you have trouble getting up and down out of a chair, it's hard for you to reach to a tall place to grab something, you need help balancing at times, you're afraid of falling, maybe you use a cane or a walker, you fall down and you hurt yourself, your health declines dramatically from that loss of mobility. I mean, it's really crazy, and I've seen it firsthand. I had a client who broke her leg falling out of or coming out of the shower, and so she couldn't train with me for a while because she had a broken leg, and her mental health it accelerated so fast in a 4-month period. It was like 5 years. It was crazy. It was insane. She was already dealing with kind of low-level dementia by the time I started training her. when she broke her leg and I saw her maybe 4 or 5 months later, she almost didn't recognize me. It was really terrifying at how fast her health declined. So loss of mobility, loss of freedom, loss of independence, and then the potential consequences of falls is huge. And so that's on top of all the other stuff that I said.
And when it comes to resistance training, we've been talking about it from the perspective of putting on muscle. But as you're talking about these people breaking bones, let's talk about that whole aspect, because I think oftentimes in the health and wellness space, when people are looking to put on bone density or maintain it, they think about calcium supplements.
Yeah.
And let's talk about if somebody comes to you with that as being a concern as they're aging, what you'd say to them.
Yeah. Well, look, if I'm trying to build a house, I definitely need wood and concrete and screws and nails, and all the raw materials. But if I don't have the workers there and if I don't have the instructions, then it's just going to sit there. All those materials are just going to sit in a big pile and nothing's going to happen. Okay. So yeah, your body needs nutrients to strengthen and build bone. So calcium and vitamin D and magnesium and so on. But if there's no signal to build and strengthen bone, it doesn't do anything. In fact, taking a lot of calcium without sending the signal to build and strengthen bone can actually result in worse health. You can develop calcium deposits in your arteries and lots of other problems. By the way, taking those nutrients when you don't have a nutrient deficiency is also a waste of time also. Okay, so people are like, oh, calcium's, I need that for strong bones. If you don't have a calcium deficiency, taking calcium is not going to do anything. Okay. Now, what tells my body directly, what can I do to tell my body directly to strengthen bone? Like, what can I do? Use resistance, strength training. Nothing tells the bones to strengthen like handling heavy resistance. Fact. Nothing. Nothing will directly tell your bones to build like strength training. Muscle, tendon, ligament, it all anchors in bone. The same stress that builds muscle will build bone. And studies will show this very clearly. Nothing improves bone density like strength training. Nothing comes close. Cardiovascular training doesn't come close. Flexibility training doesn't come close. Swimming doesn't come close. Strength training is a direct signal. It's direct information. It's direct directions. Build and strengthen. And then if you have the adequate nutrients, right, you don't have a nutrient deficiency, well, now your body's going to build bone. And you'll see it. You'll see it. Go measure your bone density. Start strength training. Go back 6 months later. Take a bone density test. Watch what happens. You and your doctor will both be shocked.
For somebody who is, say, in their mid-60s and they're taking this in right now and they've been neglectful of resistance training and say their muscle mass right now is pretty pitiful and so is their bone density,
Mm-hmm.
how much of a chance do they have at building that up at that age?
Your body...
Because you hear a lot about maintenance, especially when it comes to muscle mass. Like you gotta build it up and then maintain it.
Yeah.
But I've heard specifically, again, to the muscle mass piece, a lot of grim information about people rebuilding that when they're older.
Yeah, your body never loses its ability to adapt. Now, the potential can be reduced as you get older. Like your ultimate strength potential is going to be lower at 75 than it would be at 25. Okay, but your body will always adapt. The second you lose the ability to adapt, you die, because so the body has those mechanisms that are in place. So can you strengthen bone and muscle in those ages? Yes, absolutely. Definitely to the point where you're healthy. You may not become a champion, weightlifter. You may not be able to press your body weight overhead, but you could definitely get to a point where you're healthy and you feel good. So that is a terrible message that people can receive or believe, and it prevents them from doing the one thing that can so significantly positively impact their health. It's really, it's really terrible. So no, I'll tell you what, the most profound changes that I've ever seen from a lifestyle perspective in clients were in people over the age of 65. Fact. Okay. You give me a 35-year-old and yeah, they become more fit, they become stronger, they feel better. And that's profound. I don't want to take anything away from that. But I take a 70-year-old who has trouble going up the stairs and in 3 months can now go up the stairs without holding onto the railing comfortably. That's profound. That's life-changing. You know, I've told this story many times. I had this one woman I trained who was in her late 70s, and she hired me, or I should say her daughter hired me to train her mom, and we would work out once a week together. And I don't remember how long this was. It was probably, I don't know, 7 months, 6, 7 months or something down the line. We'd been training consistently once a week. And I remember she walked into my studio. I used to have this small, like one-on-one studio for trainers and coaches and all that. And she walked in one day, and I was with another client, and I thought I had made a mistake on the schedule. So I saw her and I said, "Oh my gosh," I said, "you know, I don't think we have a session scheduled." And she said, No. She's like, I just wanted to come in here and tell you I was next door grocery shopping, and I had the bagger load my car for me. And without thinking, I reached up, grabbed my trunk, and pulled it down. She says, I haven't been able to do that in 10 years. I haven't been able to reach up far enough to grab my trunk and pull it down and close my trunk. I didn't even think about it. I grabbed it, pulled it down, and then I sat there, and I couldn't believe that I was able to do that. And I just had to come and tell you. Like, that's profound. That is a massive change in your lifestyle, you know, or being able to get up and down off the couch. I mean, that's incredible. So yeah, no, you're going to see bigger lifestyle changes and improvements in advanced age than you would when you're younger. Now, your potential again may be lower, but I don't think a 7-year-old is exercising or going to start strength training right now with the intention of deadlifting, you know, twice their body weight. I think what they're doing is they're saying, I want to become healthier. I want to improve my longevity, my mobility. I want to feel a difference. And they will. They'll feel a significant difference.
And another layer onto this, and we talked about this last time, is muscle memory. So for somebody who used to work out, say in their 20s and 30s, they're not actually starting from ground zero. The muscles remember that previous build that they've had, and it can come back easier.
Yeah, if you were to let's say train for an entire year and gain, let's say 10 pounds of lean body mass, which would be significant in a year period, and then let's say for whatever reason you lost it all, you would gain it back if you went back to training within a month or two. So what took you a year, you would gain back in, let's say, 1/10 the time. That's called muscle memory. It's well documented. If you've ever broken a limb, you've experienced it, where you had to take a cast off your leg or your arm, and you look at your arm and like, oh my God, it's so skinny, like there's no muscle. And then just through daily movement, your arm comes back to normal size in a very short period of time. So that's an adaptation evolutionary process that we have. It's an ancient evolutionary, like I said, adaptation that we have. And it's remarkable. So, but also just of note, whatever you do to get stronger, you need to do a fraction of what you did to keep it. It's pretty crazy. There's some studies that show that 1/9 of the training that it took to get to where you're at would be required to maintain. I mean, that just makes strength training so much more attractive, I think. It's like, okay, you know, once I get there, well, to keep it, it's so much easier. And I can miss workouts and, you know, I lose the activity, you know, don't get me wrong, there's benefits that you'll lose, but the muscle strength and muscle mass itself, it sticks around.
That's encouraging. And for somebody tuning into this and say they are in that bracket of, 60 plus years old, they haven't taken this stuff we're talking about seriously today, resistance training to this point, and they want to start today. How effective is just using body weight and putting on the muscle and getting a lot of these benefits we've been talking about?
Yeah, let me be very clear. Resistance training or strength training, all it is a form of exercising using some form of resistance, which can be body weight. It could be a stretchy band. It could be, of course, free weights or machines. All it is using some type of resistance in a way to build strength and build muscle. That's it. So what does that look like? Okay, I mentioned the tools that you can use: body weight, resistance bands, machines, free weights. What does that mean to use them in a way to build strength and muscle? You do reps and you rest in between sets. Okay, so it's not going from one exercise to another nonstop and I'm sweating and breathing hard. That's endurance training. That's not what I'm talking about. It's lifting something or doing something for, let's say, 10 motions, 10 repetitions with a sufficient intensity, and that's based off of your current fitness level. So again, if you're doing nothing, it doesn't require much at all. If you're very advanced, then it requires much more. And then you rest about a minute, and then you repeat it. Now, why do you need to rest? In order to build strength, we have to train the strength system, known as the anaerobic energy system. And if I don't rest and I go from exercise to exercise to exercise, I train the aerobic system, which doesn't build much strength and muscle, just builds stamina and endurance. So I do a set, I sit down, I wait a minute, literally 60 seconds or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, and then I repeat it again. I got to train the strength system. That's it. That's pretty much it in a nutshell.
And when it comes to basic movements, again, we're talking to the newbie here, somebody that's just beginning.
Yeah.
What is, say, a handful of different movements that they want to incorporate to work the whole body?
Oh, God. You don't need to do very many. And there's variations of the ones I'm about to say, but it's very simple. You need to do some kind of a squatting movement. Okay. There's a lot of variations, but a body weight squat would qualify. Some kind of a pressing movement. So a push-up or all the push-up variations, including pushing up against the wall. If that, that's a very regressed version if I'm just getting started, or pressing something overhead. Okay. Some kind of a pulling movement. So a row would be good. A pull down or a pull up would be good in more advanced, circles. And then something that involves rotation. So rotating with a band or rotating with a cable or a weight, just to strengthen that kind of rotating movement. And then if you want to add something else, something that strengthens the core directly, a floor crunch would be just fine. That's it. I mean, you're set right there. Now you could do a lot of variations, right? So I mentioned squats. So you could do a squat, you could do a lunge, you could do a walking lunge, you could do a step up. There's like a lot of different variations of that. A row, a pull down, different types of rows for the pulling, pressing. There's lots, but that's it. Those basic things that I said, if you did something that kind of fell in each of those categories every day, every time I should say you exercise, you'd be set.
I think it's important we're getting into this on such a simple level for the beginner because
Yeah.
it can be so intimidating if somebody's tuning into the video and looking at your size right now, and there's so much information out there in the complex realm, which is necessary too for the people that are at that level. But I find, well, I know my audience, a lot of them are older and they're older males.
Yeah.
And they've probably never taken this on to a serious point. So I think it's important we're getting to the nuts and bolts here and giving them hope. Again, a lot of them maybe have heard that there's no sense in starting to exercise later in life. I can't really do much at that point. We're giving people hope and we're giving people the necessary info to get started.
Yeah, it's remember, the right dose will get you there, that will get you the best results. And if you're not doing anything now, it doesn't take much. So if you're watching this right now and you haven't done strength training in a while, or let's say ever, you could literally do some body weight squats. If that's too challenging for you, if your form isn't great, you feel it in your knees, you could just sit down and stand back up. That would be a squat, and do it in a way to where it doesn't hurt any joints. So slowly sit down, slowly stand up. If you need to raise the height of the chair because sitting down, in a deep chair might be too difficult, that's fine. You could start there. So there's one movement. You could do where you stand up against the wall, move your feet away against it, away from the wall, push your body, let your body go to the wall, push your body away. There's your pressing movement. And then for your pulling movement, get yourself a stretchy resistance band, tie it around a doorknob, stand up or sit down, pull it back, pull the shoulders back so you feel the upper mid back kind of pulling back to give you that kind of good posture. You train the back area. There's 3 exercises, you're done. Like, that's your workout, right? You could do like 1 to 3 sets of each of those, stop right there. In a few days, try it again. As you get stronger, add a little bit more reps or intensity. And that's a great place to start. That'll, for the first 2 or 3 months, get you some good strength gains.
Well, let's come back to the hormonal piece, specifically testosterone. I know for the males, you mentioned before how this is important for males and females. But the aging males, I know this is a common area of interest and something that is naturally going to decline as males age. Let's talk about this as a whole. What do you recommend for somebody, say they're middle age, they've never had their testosterone tested? Is that the first step in determining what they need to do here?
Yeah, I would get testosterone and free testosterone tested because they're both important. Free testosterone is the testosterone that is actually active. Okay, so sometimes there's cases where you could have good testosterone total, but then your free testosterone is low, so you have because it's bound up by something called sex binding hormone globulin, which means it's inactive. Okay, so you could have low testosterone symptoms even though your total testosterone looks fine. But I would get testosterone levels checked, and then get good consistent sleep, eat a diet that's not lacking any nutrients. Nutrient deficiencies can cause testosterone issues, so like zinc, magnesium, vitamin D being the most common. I would have adequate fat and protein, especially protein, in my diet. Do some strength training, and then you would probably notice a nice substantial increase in both total and free testosterone just from doing those things consistently. Now, if you're doing all the right things and your testosterone levels are below where they should be, and I would say, below 500 total is probably where some men will start to notice some side effects, definitely below 300. Then you can look at hormone therapy. Hormone therapy is becoming much more common these days because we're not quite sure, but we think it has to do, obviously, in activity, less muscle, but we do think that there are hormone disrupting chemicals now in the environment that just weren't present a few decades ago that seem to be causing some havoc in in men's hormones in particular. But before you look there, most men can significantly improve their testosterone levels by like 30, 40, 50% just from getting good sleep, improving their diet, and doing strength training.
And Sal, you mentioned the TRT there and how people may need to turn to that. I know part of your story is you got to a point where your health was failing, and you touched on this, the fact that, you want to start with lifestyle first and doing the right things,
Yeah.
which you were doing, but you weren't getting the results and your testosterone was bottoming out.
Yeah.
So take us back there, what you were feeling, where your levels were, and then eventually turning to TRT to bring that up.
Yeah. So people understand the context. In my 20s and 30s at the time, the supplement market was there was a segment of the supplement market that wasn't regulated, or should I say none of the supplement market's regulated, but there was a hormone segment. They used to call them pro hormones that you could buy over the counter. In reality, many of these were designer steroids. And what these supplement companies would do is they were able to look at the current regulation, skirt regulation by creating, by I should say, researching pharmaceutical companies' discarded anabolic steroid conceptions, bring them to market. They weren't technically illegal, but they were actually designer steroids. And so I used these throughout that period, thinking I was using what's called a pro hormone, something that wasn't an active steroid. And so that probably caused some permanent depressions in my testosterone level as I hit closer to 40. So I used these in my 20s, maybe into my early 30s on and off, stopped using them. Once I started getting to my late 30s, I couldn't figure out why I had all these symptoms of low testosterone. Now, I didn't know it was low testosterone because my libido seemed to be okay, but I had all the other classic symptoms: low energy, fat gain that seemed to be unexplained, my strength and muscle was going down, anxiety. Never had anxiety before. All of a sudden I was having symptoms of anxiety. Went and got my hormone levels tested, and my total testosterone was in the floor, and I had been leading a healthy life. So I knew, I could have raised my testosterone 50%, I still would have been low. So at that point, I had to make the decision to go on testosterone replacement therapy, and that was just a total godsend. It was a game changer. I think Western medicine, for what it can do, is a miracle. But most people won't encounter that. Most people's low testosterone can be remedied through lifestyle. I just happened to, I took hormones and hormone-like compounds that probably caused a permanent depression in my testosterone, which now I have to remedy through medical intervention.
It sounds like when you started taking the medical intervention that things radically shifted for you. You mentioned it was a godsend.
Yeah.
Talk about that period when you started taking and how quickly you started to feel better and what that shift was like.
Oh, within a month, my energy was good. My anxiety disappeared. I felt like myself is the best way I could describe it. So that's like any deficiency that you have that needs medical intervention, like a vitamin or mineral deficiency, or let's say your thyroid is low and there's nothing you're doing naturally that seems to work or help. When you then supplement it, it's a life changer. So I just felt so different. It was like, oh, this is why I've been feeling like crap for the last 3 years. This is what's going on. But again, I didn't realize it at the time because my low libido, sexual dysfunction is like the number one thing men will notice with low testosterone. But there are occasional cases like mine where I didn't necessarily notice that. So I didn't look to testosterone to find a reason or cause for my symptoms.
By hearing your story, it sounds like at the time when you were taking these hormones, you didn't realize the negative effects they could have. And it sounds like they were, accepted in the bodybuilding and resistance training world at the time.
Yeah.
One sec. What I'm getting at here is there anything people that you're seeing, you're obviously your ears to the ground and you're in this world. Is there anything new that people are taking that you could see turning out to be a negative thing that people are doing these days that they want to be on the lookout for?
Yeah. So again, I would say I was willfully ignorant in those days. I got into exercise because of body image issues, the whole self-hate thing that I talk about. I lived it. That's why I communicate it so often. So yeah, when you took them, you could tell like, oh, this is doing something to me. But it's over the counter, so it's fine. It was kind of my attitude. Obviously, it wasn't fine. Today, you have a gray market for selective androgen receptor modulators, or what are known as SARMs. These are chemicals that attach to the androgen receptor and act like testosterone and steroids, but are not testosterone and steroids. It's a gray market because they are not regulated for human consumption, or should I say they're legal for human consumption, but you could technically buy them online as research chemicals. So you have all these, for lack of a better term, companies with no integrity that are selling them for research purposes, but they know what's happening. People are buying them and taking them. And we don't know what the effects are on the body. They haven't been well studied. At the very least, we know that they have steroid-like effects. They depress your natural testosterone just like anabolics do. So I would avoid that. Plus, it's unregulated, so you don't know what you're getting. Okay, so they could put whatever they want in the bottle, and who knows. The peptide market is also very interesting. Now, peptides are remarkable and have some really remarkable potential health effects, good health effects in the body, but the unregulated gray market of research chemicals, we don't know. We don't know what they're putting in the bottle. If the peptide is off by a couple amino acids, who knows what it's telling your body to do. You could now get peptides in a regulated way where they're coming from a compound pharmacy and you're working with a doctor, in which case I'd say, oh, that's fine. But there's a lot of people going to the gray markets online, getting these research chemicals and basically becoming experiments and not knowing and just kind of basing it off how they feel. Like, oh, I think it's working. I can feel it. Like, we don't know what you're getting, if it's dirty. We don't know if there's additional amino acid chains attached to this that are making it do other things in the body. Who knows? So I would say watch out for that whole research chemical SARM peptide space. If you're going to work with hormones, work with a doctor. If you're going to work with peptides, work with a doctor. And then I would stay away from SARMs until they're regulated and prescribed and you're monitored by a doctor.
Talk more about the peptides, because this is something I'm hearing more and more about in the health and wellness space. It's not something I've ever delved into the research to find out exactly what they are. So what are they, and what are the positive ways that you're seeing people using them? Expand upon that some more.
So peptides already exist in the body. Now peptides loosely refer to a long chain of amino acids. Technically, growth hormone is a peptide. Okay, so that's the kind of loose umbrella term. But the peptides that are being used therapeutically are compounds that have been identified in the body that signal the body to perform certain things. So like there are peptides that tell the body to amplify its healing and recovery process. There are peptides that tell your body to release more growth hormone. There are peptides that tell the body to tan its skin. There's all kinds of different peptides that tell the body to improve its glucose utilization, uptake more glucose, produce more energy. Now, what makes peptides unique is they're not drugs. So we're not forcing the body to have effects. We're using its already present signaling system, which means that what's also already present in the body are checks and balances. So I could take a growth hormone releasing peptide and it'll tell my body to release more growth hormone, but I will not release more growth hormone than my body would release naturally in optimum, I should say, ways, right? So I may get my body to release growth hormone levels that would match what I did in my 20s, but I'm not going to go above that. I'm not going to be able to get my body to release so much growth hormone that it's like I'm taking bodybuilder doses of growth hormones. So that's what makes them quite unique. Peptides are largely unpatented or unpatentable because of their structure. Now, I think that pharmaceutical companies are trying to find ways to lobby the FDA to be able to regulate because there's so much money that could potentially be made here if they could patent them. But for now, you could find peptide. You could go through a compound pharmacy. The compound pharmacy produces the peptide, and you get them for like really low prices. So the margins aren't huge. This is why pharmaceutical companies aren't jumping all over them. But the ones that they can patent, they are jumping on. For example, GLP-1 agonists like semaglutide, also known as the trade name Ozempic, right? This is like the big fat loss drug that is like just exploding because people are seeing that they're losing weight on it. It suppresses their appetite. It's got great beneficial effects on the brain and all this other stuff. But you could also buy semaglutide, the generic version of Ozempic, go through a compound pharmacy and a doctor and get it for far less than what you would do when you go through the patented brand name of it. But yeah, that's the world of peptides. I've only really dived in deep the last year. With this, we did a great podcast with one of the lead doctors and researchers in that space, Dr. Seeds. So for anybody who wants to learn more, I would suggest checking out that episode. Pretty remarkable. My experience with peptides has been pretty amazing. MOTC is a peptide that I used that had some profound effects, crazy energy effects, had some fat loss effects, mood boosting effects. BPC 157, probably the most recommended peptide for the body, great for brain health, great for healing, injuries, recovery. I love how that is making me feel. My gut health has had profound effects, positive effects from BPC 157. But there's, I think, like 1,000 peptides. So this is kind of an emerging, I should say, space in terms of the mainstream. But peptide science and peptides themselves have been experimented with and used for decades now.
You just mentioned the decade factor, but 5-10 years ago, was this something that you found people in your circle were experimenting with and talking about? To me, it seems just so new that at least in the mainstream, it's catching wind.
It was fringe in my space in the sense that you saw biohackers using and talking about them. But like the Soviets, they were using peptides for a long time and using them as medicines for a long time. You saw some experiments here in the U.S. But again, because you can't patent them under current, I guess, regulations, pharmaceutical companies have very little interest in pursuing them and the studies around them. But they are quite remarkable. I think, I would like to see more funding go the way of peptides so that we could start to see some, like, lots of human studies. But I mean, like I said, they're pretty remarkable in their potential and their ability. And again, I'll defer to, because this is not my expertise, I'll defer to the experts on this. But like I said, I talked to Dr. Seeds, he's been researching these for a while, and he's like one of the leading world's authorities on this. And based off of what he's saying, it's like this is pretty cool stuff. They don't have the side effects that drugs do, because you don't get this like receptor downregulation and all these other side effects because you had to kind of shoehorn in a compound to affect particular receptors. You're giving your body what it already uses to signal these functions. So it has its own natural checks and balances, which inherently makes them a lot safer to use.
You mentioned Ozempic. Is that actually a peptide? It sounds like it might be a little bit gray if it's actually under that umbrella. It is obviously a drug, but is it considered a peptide as well?
It's a peptide, 100%. GLP-1 agonist. Yeah, it's 100% a peptide.
And how do you feel about that? That one's definitely caught a lot of mainstream media attention, and
It works. You know, my belief around things like that, because you'll take Ozempic and you'll lose weight, right? You'll lose, the data would show 10 to 20% of body weight without doing anything else, just taking that. It does suppress your appetite. It's probably definitely one of the main ways it works. It also seems to rewire behaviors around, or should I say compulsive behaviors. So people will report that they don't want to smoke as much or drink as much, or bite their nails or stuff like that. But here's the problem. If you just eat less and you don't strength train and you don't monitor protein intake, then a significant portion of your weight loss will come from muscle. And you're not dealing with the root cause as to why you overeat, why you're inactive. So it's not by itself a great solution, but I do see it as a good bridge. The same way I would see antidepressant and anxiolytic use among people with, let's say, low levels of chronic depression, where they could use an antidepressant to kind of bridge between where they're at now to the behaviors that lead to better mental health, like activity, sunlight, better relationships. So I could see GLP-1 agonists being used as a way to, like, somebody who's really struggled, just has these impulsive eating behaviors, to use them in conjunction with exercise, diet, strength training, and then slowly build up those disciplines and behaviors and then come off the peptide type of deal.
how do you feel about supplementing with amino acids? Just pivoting off of the peptide thing here.
Yeah.
That's a common supplement, and there is some controversy over, supplementing with those and cancer. And how do you feel about all that?
I mean, amino acids are just the building blocks of proteins. If your protein intake is low, or shall I say lower than what's considered optimal, but especially if it's low, like really low, right? So there's essential protein intake, which you need to survive. And then you can have a little bit more than that. And then you can eat optimal, which is much higher. So optimal protein intake would be around 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of ideal body weight. Okay. So that's a lot of protein. If we eat below that, then certain amino acids can have some benefits, like branched amino acids or essential amino acids can have recovery benefits, performance benefits. But if you're eating adequate protein, it's a waste of money, complete waste of money. So like it'd be like, if you're eating a gram of protein per pound of ideal body weight, taking additional amino acids is totally a waste of money. And for somebody who benefits from taking amino acids because the protein intake is low, they'll get way more benefit from just eating more protein. So, mixed, my opinion on amino acids is mixed. The people that I see benefit the most from amino acid supplementation are really strict vegans, just because it's so hard for them to get adequate protein. That's where I see them benefit, that people that benefit from things like essential amino acid supplements, where I'll have them take a vegan-based essential amino acid supplement with their meals to offset the fact that their protein intake is low.
And for somebody that wants to supplement with more protein or amino acids, how do you compare, say, like a whey protein versus branched chain amino acids?
I mean, 10 grams of whey protein has more branched amino acids in it than your 5 branched amino acid pills. So you're better off having a small scoop of protein. I mean, that's it. Fact. So the whole amino acid market is interesting to me because just have more protein. That's usually how I communicate it.
Yeah, that's how I feel about it too. I was wondering if there was something else there I was missing.
No, again, if your protein intake's low and it's hard for you to get more protein, and you want to just take a tablet, a couple tablets, then yeah, you might get some benefit. But other than that, it's like, just eat more protein. And even a vegan, my vegan clients, I would encourage them to take a scoop of vegan protein instead of taking amino acid tablets.
All right. So obviously one of the foundations for the diet you recommend is getting a lot of protein.
Yes.
We've talked a lot about resistance training and why that's important. For somebody that's going to incorporate that or is incorporating that and they want to get the diet piece right, other than protein, what else do they need to consider?
I mean, honestly, if you hit your protein in target and you prioritize that, meaning you eat that first in the meal. So let's say your ideal body weight is 150 pounds. So you're aiming for between 130 to 150 grams of protein a day. Okay. And that would mean that every meal that you have should have between 40 to 50 grams of protein in it. And you ate that first. That alone, for most people, will result in fat loss because protein is extremely satiety inducing in comparison to carbohydrates and fats. You'll eat less without even trying. And then the muscle building effects that induces in combination with strength training and the metabolism boost. But if you wanted to add something else, the other one I would do is avoid heavily processed foods. So protein, avoid heavily processed foods. Most people would get pretty close within range of what they would consider to be a healthy body weight just from doing those two things consistently. That's it, nothing else.
Okay, so for somebody that's going to take on incorporating more protein, the first thing we talked about there, and they're thinking about doing that through, say, a shake, like a whey protein adjunct to their meal, to you, how does that differ between having, say, like a steak
Yeah.
when it comes to being satiating and beyond?
Yeah. Protein shakes are the processed food version of protein. So the satiety effects of a protein shake are not anywhere close to the satiety effects of protein found in food. Even if you account for the macros, some people will be like, well, yeah, steak also has fat in it, whatever, fine. Eat chicken breast, dry, right? Like almost no fat, pure protein. Eat a 30-gram protein chicken breast and 30-gram whey shake. See which one affects your appetite more strongly, right? So, protein shakes are good for one reason and one reason only. At the end of the day, if you miss your protein targets, then you add it as an emergency supplement. Other than that, whole foods. Otherwise, you're going to be missing out on the benefits that I'm talking about.
So earlier when we talked about testosterone, you mentioned the fact that, again, this is important for males and females. Traditionally, it's considered more of a male hormone, but you've clarified that. But what I'm interested in is beyond that, when it comes to males and females, when it comes to exercise, how do they have to look at things differently, or do they?
No, there's no difference. The differences are on an individual level, but there's no like men do this and women do that. Our bodies adapt the same. Of course, the capacity for strength and muscle is much higher in men. There's a lot of reasons for that. One of them being the hormones, but there's lots of other reasons for that. Like you could take the testosterone out of a man and he's going to probably build more strength and muscle than a woman would anyway. But aside from that, there's no difference. I mean, marketing, so you're going to see routines for women and men, but that's because they know that it's effective marketing. But there's no difference at all. It's all on the individual. So whatever works better for you and how you move and the mobility issues you may have and your lifestyle, that's what you should pay attention to. Don't pay attention to. I'll say this. Look, I'll say this. Avoid, if you're a woman watching and listening to this right now, avoid workout routines that are designed for women, because all they did was take an effective routine and water it the hell down and probably colored it with some, feminine color and marketing to make it appeal to women. But what they typically do is they'll take an effective workout, make it easier, make it lighter, make you do 1 million more reps, and then they say, here it is for women. So that's kind of a rule of thumb. Like workouts designed for women are usually worse than just normal workouts.
All right, so you just smashed one of the big myths there when it comes to resistance training between males and females. What are some of the other ones? You've been in this world for longer than most people, and I'm sure you've seen a lot of the different myths and probably even believed and applied some of them over the years. What are some of the things people are doing that are just total BS that they need to ignore?
Yeah, you can't. Your muscle shape is determined largely by your genetics. There aren't exercises that give you long, lean muscles versus others that develop big, bulky muscles or anything like that. Muscles build or shrink. Your genetics determine largely their shape, aside from the large muscle groups where targeted exercises develop different parts. For example, the chest, that could develop the upper chest more than lower chest, vice versa. But for the most part, it's your genetics. And muscles build or shrink. They don't tone, they don't sculpt. They build, or they shrink. Another myth is that, strength training is going to produce a bulky look in women. No, that's not what's going to happen. Building muscle is very dense. If every woman watching this right now gained 10 pounds of muscle and simultaneously lost 10 pounds of fat, so their weight was the same on the scale, they would be smaller. They would look smaller, much smaller, but they would lose about a quarter of the size on their body because fat takes up more space. So the whole fear of like, oh no, I'm going to work out with weights and then I'm going to look like Arnold, that's not the case at all.
What about the thought that if you do certain workouts, you can burn fat in different areas?
No.
Say, like the double chin or the tummy, targeting different areas of fat burning.
You can target development, like I'm going to develop my shoulders, I'm going to develop my bicep, I'm going to develop my hamstrings, but you can't target fat. Fat loss is determined by genetics and hormones. Hormonal changes can change fat storage patterns a bit. Like higher cortisol, more insulin resistance can cause more fat storage in the midsection. But that and genetics are what determine where you start. So good rule of thumb is the first place you put it on, people are like, oh my God, I eat bad. And it's like right away I feel it in my belly or my hips or whatever. The first place you put it on is the last place you'll lose it. And you can either thank or curse your parents for that. There's not much you can do other than just get leaner overall.
And Sal, I'm sure you've seen over the years, probably you can clarify this, but the most common reason people would come to you is to lose weight. So somebody, is overweight, obese, wherever they're at along that spectrum, tuning into this today, and they're going to, they're in a busy lifestyle right now. They don't have tons of extra time. What would you say to them to give them the biggest bang for their buck when it comes to weight loss?
3 things. I'll give you 4 things, but they're all easy. One is more challenging than the other because it requires more structure. So here's your 4 steps that will result in consistent, progressive, sustainable fat loss and will get you pretty close. Some people will get them all the way, but pretty close to a healthy body weight. Okay. So a nice, generally healthy body weight. Okay. Here they are. Hit your protein targets, the ones that I mentioned earlier, about a 0.8 to 1 gram per pound of target body weight. So if you need to lose 50 pounds to get to your target body weight, use that as your guide. Okay. So target body weight in protein in grams, prioritize that. So that's number 1. Avoid heavily processed foods. That's number 2. Heavily processed foods make you overeat. Period. End of story. They're engineered to do so. And if you eat them, you will eat more. It'll be very difficult. So if you avoid them, you'll naturally eat the right amount. Okay. You're much more likely to eat the right amount. So those are the 2 dietary things. Number 3, strength train. Okay. At least once a week, ideally twice a week, but at least once a week. Do some form of strength training and try and get stronger progressively over time. And then here's the 4th one. Number 4, walk after breakfast, lunch, and dinner. That's it. If you just did those things consistently, by the way, if that's too much, that's okay. Start with 1 or 2 of them, do that until it becomes consistent, then add the next one, okay? But if you just did those 4 things, if everybody watching, listening to me, did just those 4 things, they would all get pretty close, if not all the way to their ideal, I should say, healthy body weight.
When it comes to burning fat and getting to that ideal body weight, there's 2 different layers to that. There's the person that needs to actually do what you just said and get there. And then there's maintaining that over the long term.
Yeah.
So working with people over the years, how often do you see people who do get to their goal put that weight back on, 2, 3 beyond years down the line?
Well, God, the data is clear on that. 90+% of people gain the weight back. Now, people who do it right, people who do it in a way to where they develop a good relationship with it, it's not hating life. They do it in a sustainable way, or it integrates into their life. They're not working out well beyond what's necessary. They're not starving themselves or eating in unsustainable ways, right? So people who do the right way, your success right now is much higher, much, much, much higher. I mean, towards the end of my career, I got really good at this, where a majority of my clients would really develop these behaviors, and then that was it. It was what they did for the rest of their life. So it's possible if you do it the right way. If you do it the wrong way, it's almost impossible.
And Sal, we talked earlier about your testosterone story and that dipping and the TRT. There's another whole period of time when your health dipped at age 31. You started having gut issues and things started to go awry. Take us back there and talk about what happened, and then we'll get into what you did to come out of it.
Yeah. So, I like many fitness, experts or professionals, I should say, people who make fitness their career. Many of us are initially motivated to work out and become obsessed with exercise because of some kind of body image issue, or we develop a dysfunctional relationship with exercise and diet. So you'll see more eating disorders in the fitness space than you will in the average population. Okay, that's just a fact. So, and I was no exception. I abused my body, and I was excellent with other people. I trained clients very well. It's like doctors, they're way better with their patients than they are with themselves. Trainers are just like that. And I did a good job with them, and I was really concerned with their health, and I would really try to help them in the best ways possible. But with myself, it was all about pushing my body and looking a particular way, ignoring my body's signals. Well, at 31, my body rebelled. I developed severe gut health issues, lost about close to 15 pounds of lean body mass, and couldn't figure out what was wrong with me. At one point, I thought I might have Crohn's disease. It was really bad. And so I had to abandon all my old methods and adopt the methods of some of the people that I worked with in my studio who were wellness oriented. And I did gut testing. I dramatically lowered the intensity of my workouts. I stopped weighing myself, stopped looking in the mirror as much because I was quite triggering, and really just chased health, really chased vitality and health. And it completely changed and shifted my relationship with exercise. And now it's always in the back of my head, but it really did change my approach, and it really molded the voice that I have now on my podcast, which is what I speak to all the time. But that was a year-long process. It was a year-long process. At the end of it, the irony is I looked better than I had looked before. And that's when I realized fully that that whole aesthetic goal, that I was always after, really was just a side effect of good health. What I was looking for was health. I was looking for the side effect of good health. And so I thought to myself, why not just be healthy? That'll make me look the way I want. And so it was a blessing in disguise, I should say.
And is this a lesson you had to learn time and time again in the coming years, or you've been pretty good since that hitting the wall there?
The big lesson was there, okay? But there's always that. I mean, I love it. I love the gym. I also love performance. I love maximum strength. I love pushing my body. I love experimenting with supplements, now, with peptides. So it's a constant battle because I'd say most people's battle is just getting consistent, right? Just getting consistent. My battle is doing too much and eating in ways that push performance beyond health. So it is a constant check and balance for myself. I do find that the podcast helps a lot because I communicate I can be very objective and genuine, and authentic when I'm helping other people. To myself, I can always be quite deceiving, but it's a mirror, right? So if I'm talking to people constantly and helping people, then there's definitely moments where I'm like, I should probably take my own advice,
Peptides aside, you mentioned you like to do different experiments. What experiments are you currently conducting?
Oh, well, I mean, the peptides are the big one right now. I'm using the BPC-157. I did MOTS-C, C-Max, which is a nootropic. It increases BDNF in the brain. That's been pretty cool. And then supplements, I mean, God, you name it. I mean, there isn't a supplement in the world that I don't think I've tried to some extent. So, I mean, I like playing with the different effects and noticing how they affect my body, my mental health, my mental clarity, energy, sleep. I mean, it definitely it's definitely beneficial from a standpoint where I can talk about these things from personal experience. But I'm pretty well aware that I definitely step outside of what's good for me oftentimes when I do these things.
Test the boundaries and then find the middle.
Yeah, it's more like go beyond the boundaries and then bring back, especially with I got a good wife that checks and it really puts a check on me sometimes.
There you go. And we've talked extensively now about diet and resistance training, but what about other health and wellness modalities that you incorporate into your routine? Things that come to mind, sauna, cold plunge, have a lot of momentum in the health and wellness space. Are you into any of that or others in that realm?
Sleep is the biggest one. So going to bed at the same time, waking up at the same time is a big deal. That makes a huge deal. Making sure you get 7 to 8 hours of sleep, big deal. That'll have profound effects on most people's health. Okay. Besides that, you mentioned the sauna. Sauna's got some great benefits. Steam room, you could probably put in that category. But besides that, the one that I don't know, just didn't look at or value for the longest time, which now, and it's ironic because the data all points to its profound effects on health alone, not just mental health, but physical health, is a spiritual practice. Spiritual practice the data is very clear on this. People who have a very consistent spiritual religious practice, they have significantly lower rates of all-cause mortality, cancer, heart disease, you name it. Mental health, much better relationships. They tend to be better parents. They tend to be better partners. They suffer from divorce rates at lower rates and anxiety and depression at lower rates. So there's definitely something there. So, without even getting into the esoteric, side of it or any of that, it's just look at the data. The data is clear. A spiritual practice is essential for health in humans. Fact, end of story. It's indisputable. So if you are somebody that is trying to improve the quality of your life, then you can't ignore the fact that this is something that has a significant impact. So you look at it, and there's lots of different ways to do it, but I'd say look at it.
Can you talk about what that looks like for you?
Yeah, I'm a Christian now. I was an atheist for a long time, and once I opened up to the wisdom of the Christian faith, I started becoming a Christian and practicing, and it's had profound benefits on me as a father, as a husband. It provided a deeper sense of meaning behind what I do. It helps a lot with some of my own challenges. So it's but that's I guess the long and short of it is I am pursuing, I should say, the Christian faith, more specifically Catholic.
And for you making that transition, you mentioned atheist to Christian. Did that come at a time of need, a time of challenge for you?
Looking back, sure. But really what it was is I opened up to the possibility of the wisdom that was present in the Judeo-Christian traditions. So when I was an atheist, it was all about denying all of it. And then when I started to really realize how it shaped culture, how it drove some of the things that we take for granted now in society, and the wisdom that just is present there, I said, okay, there's wisdom here. There is wisdom here, and I should be open to the wisdom alone. Forget the metaphysical aspect, okay? I can still think that there's no God or any of that stuff, but I'm going to be stupid if I don't look here and see that there's genuine wisdom, and I should open up to that. Once I did that, then I started opening to everything else. And of course, at some point you come to the leap of faith, right? At some point, then you start to struggle with that, and you have to either make that leap or not. And that's eventually what got me there. But it was initially just opening up to the wisdom. Because if you look at and here's an easy example, okay? Free societies. Okay. Societies that value the rights of the individual. That is so counterintuitive, it's not even funny. That makes no intuitive sense. For all of human history, it was, I'm bigger and stronger, and I'll get what I want. I have more power than you. You do what I say. That's how humans have always lived. And then we created these systems, and they weren't expressed perfectly, and they still aren't, but they drive us to progress in this direction. Like, who would have thought, right, that you're going to design a government that protects individual liberties? Where the hell did that come from? This is during a time of kings and queens and all kinds of crazy stuff. And you had people saying, no, we want to do this. Where'd they get that idea? It came from the Judeo-Christian faith. So that's a crazy wisdom that isn't intuitive. I don't think we should take that for granted. So that was one of the ways that I said, okay, there's something here. Let me open my mind up a little bit to this potential wisdom. And then when I did, it was like, wow, oh my gosh, they said that? How did they know? How do they know all these different things? That's so crazy. So.
And how long has that journey been for you, the religious piece?
It's been at least 4 years, maybe 3 or 4 years.
And I'm assuming maybe the religion ties into this, but when it comes to stress management, do you have like a meditation practice, certain things you're doing? Obviously, exercise is a stress management tool in and of itself, but exercise, religion aside, anything else in that pillar under that category?
Yeah, spending time with my family, focusing on being present is a big one. You know, my stress, and I would assume most people's stress, can revolve around not being here now. So it's like I'm thinking about the past, or I'm anxious about something in the future. You know, meanwhile, I'm sitting here and everything's okay. Everything's kind of cool. Or I'm sitting with my kids and like I'm missing out on what's happening now. There was a good book that I read years ago that was on the beginning of my spiritual journey, I would say. It was Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. And he talks a lot about being present. And that is like, I mean, if you could really master this and work on this, you find that when you become really, really present, your stress melts away.
As we talk about this whole mindset piece and the mind and, religion, everything we're getting into right here, it gets me thinking about the name Mind Pump Media.
Yeah.
Talk about the origin there and how the mind ties into that whole brand.
Well, when we started the show, my co-hosts and I have been in the space for, 2.5 decades. And we knew that fitness would be a cornerstone of our conversations, but we didn't want to pigeonhole ourselves because luckily we had done it for so long that we realized that health encompasses life. It's everything, right? So it's not just exercise and diet. It's also mental health. It's relationships. It's family relationships and friend relationships. It's spiritual health and how we frame things. And so we wanted a podcast where the name didn't necessarily, because, you end up pigeonholing yourself if it's like, fitness pump or muscle build or whatever, right? We wanted something that allowed us to talk about lots of different things. We also knew as trainers that a lot of our success revolved around our abilities to make the experience enjoyable for our clients, which meant a lot of our conversations had nothing to do with fitness. Like people showed up and they liked hanging out with us while we trained them. So a big part of our show is not fitness. We talk about current events. We talk about family life. We talk about, things that are funny to us. It's the entertainment piece. And I mean, full disclosure, we're trying to attract as many people as possible so that they can start to hear what we have to say about health and fitness. And one of the best ways to do that is also make it entertaining. So when you listen to some of our most popular episodes, the first half of the show is, very little to do with fitness, but we know that attracts more people.
For somebody on their own health and wellness journey, tuning into this point, and, they've heard, again, us get into the fitness piece, the diet piece, and now this whole mindset, religion piece. What are some of the other pieces that they need to make sure they're at least looking at to make sure they're getting the foundation in the health realm as a whole?
Well, I mean, generally you can, because that's a lot of things. Because we mentioned the big ones, right? But you have a relationship with all of your behaviors, okay? And if you can take an honest look at certain ways that you are and certain things that you do, and if you can honestly say to yourself, this is less than ideal, this isn't really healthy, then there's something there that you should look at. So this could be your financial health. You could look at your bank account and be like, I'm living paycheck to paycheck. Do I need to be living this? So of course, there's times when that's just the way it is, but there's lots of times where, why do I spend money on things I don't necessarily need? Or are there ways I could spend money that are going to be more fulfilling? You have a relationship with traffic. You have a relationship with being on time or other types of stress. I think you could look at different things and say to yourself, I don't necessarily, let's look at it like something simple, right? Like coffee. Right? A lot of people like to wake up in the morning and have coffee. If the thought of not having coffee in the morning is just terrifying, well, there might be something there you want to look at, right? What is it? Is it the caffeine? Well, what if I give you a caffeine pill? Are you going to be still as upset? Oh, you are? Well, maybe there's something about the coffee. I don't know, right? So, this is obviously taking inventory, but, this is after you've tackled those big rocks. You could do that and say, I feel uncomfortable sitting alone with my teenage kids. I don't feel like I can bond with them. Well, let's take a look at that. Maybe there's something there that you can work on, and it usually has to do with something with yourself.
So it sounds like the first step when it comes to improving, take that inventory of your life, be really honest with yourself where you're at, and then you can work from there.
Totally. If you're willing, because the first step is just admitting, but admitting doesn't mean you have to do something. The reason why I say that is I think sometimes people will not admit because they feel like they have to take action. That's okay. You can look at something and say, well, I don't got the best relationship with this particular behavior. I'm not ready to tackle it yet, but I'm going to admit the fact that it's not a great relationship. And that's okay. That's a good step.
You've touched on family, and one of the big pillars in the health and wellness space for a lot of people is community. How do you look at that when it comes to maintaining that within your own health and wellness routine?
Well, the people you hang out with and associate yourself with, they will influence you and they will bring certain things out in you, right? So if you have a friend who you and them connect really only when you guys drink, then if you try and stop drinking, it's going to be really hard to maintain that relationship with that person. And that relationship may dissolve as a result. And that's okay because you're doing something, that you need to do or whatever. So in the context of health and fitness, seek out and foster relationships with people that prioritize, I'll say, or lead lives with health and fitness that you think might help you, right? Like if you're going to go out and eat with a group of people, it's going to be much easier to do so when you're eating with people who also prioritize eating healthy. You're not going to feel so much like you're sticking out. The temptation isn't going to be there as much, and you're not going to get the grief. If you've ever, a lot of people, I'm sure this will resonate with. It's like you change your diet to try and eat healthy, then you go out with your friends, they all eat unhealthy, and now you're like, no thanks. And then, it's a mirror, right? So it reflects upon them. And so now they're making you feel weird about it. Well, who cares? What's the big deal? Oh, this stupid diet, just enjoy your type of deal. And that can make it tough. That can create a wedge. So I would say, seek out people and foster relationships with people that'll help you move in the direction you want to move. It makes a huge difference.
A big part of our message today was fitness, resistance training. We've given people the reason why to do it, reasons, and we've given people the basics to get started if they haven't already. What would you say to the person right now who is, again, tuned into this point and they're on the fence? Maybe they've tried to adopt a resistance training routine in the past and they've dropped it. What would you say to them to make sure that they're taking this seriously and giving them the inspiration to get started?
Yeah. Take one step. And the way you determine what that step is make sure that it's a step that's somewhat challenging. because otherwise it's not going to have any meaning. So it has to have some challenge, right? But ask yourself if this is something that you feel like you can maintain for the rest of your life. That's the step you take. And there is no wrong answer. So it can be, I'm going to drink an extra glass of water a day. It could be, I'm going to walk for 5 minutes on Mondays. It could be, I'm going to do 1 squat every morning when I wake up. Like, it doesn't matter what that step is, so long as it's somewhat challenging, but also realistic forever. Just start there. And then when it becomes a behavior, then ask yourself again what the next step is. And what'll happen is each step tends to get a little bigger, and the gap in between steps starts to get shorter. So this is a snowball effect. But that's it. That's where you start. Now, I do have a book that people can read that really helps and it gives people some more structure. It's called The Resistance Training Revolution. And in there, I kind of talk about, kind of how to get the ball rolling. And I give you some structure if you need a little more structure. You can also, on YouTube, our channel, the Mind Pump channel, we have one that's all exercise oriented. There's lots of exercises and demos if you need more help. But what I said is really it. It's like, take that first step, stick with it. When it becomes a behavior, take the next step, and that's it.
Perfect. Sal, really enjoyed this again. We're going to link up the YouTube channel, the book, your social media, everything in the show notes.
Perfect.
And I just want to thank you again for coming on the show. This was great.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on.
Now that you're done my conversation with Sal, you're going to want to stick around here and catch my chat with Gabrielle. She's got a lot more to share when it comes to building muscle and burning fat. I'll see you over there.
People say they don't have time. And the reality is, if you don't have time for fitness, then how do you think you're going to have time for sickness? I think that we have a muscle crisis.